Welcome to this session. I'm Beatriz Bevilacqua from Brazil. I'm a technology journalist, and I will moderate this panel today. Let's start. In this moment of big changes around the world, we want to talk about how we can build strong and trusted international networks, places where brave founders, smart leaders, and creative people can work together to put people and especially the planet at the center of business. In this session, we are going to talk about how impact entrepreneurship is growing in different countries, what we can learn from each other, what new trends are coming, and what we can do in practice to connect good ideas, public policies, and support assistance to create better solutions for everyone. Now, I introduce Daniel Blackman and Peter Pitash. Peter is a social entrepreneur, CEO of Cambio, Spanish name, House of Social Change, a world-leading sustainability consultancy, working with a range of clients across the public and private sectors. And Daniel Blackman is a founder of Renaissance 94, a global social impact organization, and served as a presidential appointee under the Biden administration. My first question for you, Daniel, what made you choose to work with impact entrepreneurship instead of traditional business models? Tell us about your journey so far.
Okay, so can you guys hear me? All right. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to the moderator and the panel that we have joined. Shout out to the UK and to the Caribbean. It's very much represented. There you go. I love it, right? So mine comes out of a family of service, and my grandfather was a diplomat to the United Nations. He retired as consul general, and so my family from Barbados played a tremendous role in how I view the international community. And so for me, it was very much a call of service. But I'll share a personal story really quickly with you guys. Renaissance is a convener of sports, entertainment, philanthropy, and we guide policy from a family office and from a regulatory kind of space where we engage institutions and individuals. But in 2015, while I was working with the Obama administration, we had a tragedy in my family. My goddaughter was a victim of human trafficking. So for me, I got involved because I was able to organize a network of family offices. I was able to work internationally to bring people together. And the good news is she was rescued, and she's doing extraordinarily well today. But for 4 years, I had to find purpose in philanthropy, right? Because a lot of times, whether it was the George Floyd incident where we saw over $500 million committed globally through philanthropy, or if it was a storm that hit Puerto Rico, philanthropy has become very reactionary. So for me, I wanted it to be purpose-driven and measurable, and I decided to launch Renaissance after I left the Biden administration to make sure that we were able to have a true measurable impact long-term, and it could really bring rooms like this to the forefront of next-gen finance and capital, but also the forefront of how we see social impact overall.
And you, Peter?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, can you hear me? Perfect, great, okay. So to start with, don't adjust your television sets. I am not Ollie Barrett. We do look the same. My taste in shirts and jackets is identical. But I'll try and bring a bit of that color to the session today. This, for me, is the session I've been most looking forward to. We've heard a lot about ecosystem building across the week, but what we haven't heard a lot about is impact. So what? What happens next? What's the impact on our communities? What's the impact on our entrepreneurs? What's the legacy? I'll talk a bit more about that later, but for now, I've been working in sustainability for about 20 years. I most recently founded Cambio, as Beatrice rightly said, inspired by my time working in Latin America, particularly in Mexico. bottom of the pyramid solutions, trying to give people a hand up, not just to start a business, but simply to put food on the table, yeah? To get access to clean water, access to the internet, fundamentals that we all need simply to survive, not just start businesses. And over the last 7 years, I built an organization that is international, that is focused on, yes, supporting entrepreneurs to grow and scale, both commercially and with impact for the environment and people, but also work with partners. I'm all about partnerships. That's why this week is so powerful. It brings partners together from all over the world. It's a genuinely multinational effort. And crucially, with the commercial economy, because we can't do all of this within the social economy. That's, again, why Jen and the work that Jen does is so critical, because without it, we wouldn't have the global and national campaigns that we do to bring you as entrepreneurs and ecosystem builders together. So this session is all about you. The final thing I will say here is that I've been to so many panels this week, and the most annoying thing is where we talk the whole time and you get to say nothing, you just applaud at the end, hopefully. What I want you to do is ask questions, yeah? So please be thinking of questions, because I'm going to keep my remarks really short.
Me too.
Great project, but the big question is, how can we create global companies that truly help people and the planet?
Start with me?
Yes.
So the question about creating global companies, I think, starts here, right? Because, I mean, I've met folks that represent over 30 or 40 countries within the last 2 days. So I think what we can't do, and I jokingly said earlier that I'm seeing a lot of individuals based on regions stick together, right? Like at the dinner, they're at the same table, they're eating lunch together. I think what's most important is understanding, whether you're from Africa or the Caribbean or from the UK, identifying individuals with similarities, right? So like when you think of Renaissance, the reason why there's a 94 at the end of Renaissance is because when we established the company, we decided to look at an aptitude test from over 100 years ago. It was a 9 dots and 4 lines test. And so the only way to draw 4 lines on 9 dots is to draw outside of the box, right? So when we think of Renaissance as a strategy, we think we may not have as much in common with, you know, a certain region of Africa as it relates to the United States, but we can build a pipeline. So one of the things that we're doing is the World Cup is in the United States next year. So we're actually creating an international incubator through Atlanta that focuses on bringing dignitaries and individuals that want to enjoy the game, but also want to help with global social impact. So we like to, forgive me for the statement, but we like to weaponize sports, right? Like, it's great to be a fan, but when you can be a fan with somebody on the field and then off the field, you can also help to impact, you know, your home country or that individual. We think that global partnerships are critical. The world is getting smaller. AI is massively connecting areas that we have not thought about, and young people are driving this change in Africa, in the Caribbean, in South America, in the UK, and we're seeing it in real time, and our job is not to jump out front, it's to follow their lead and also make sure that we offer the resources that we have to expand that conversation.
For you?
Yeah,
Peter?
I mean, for me, we need to be platforming role models. Yeah, so organizations and entrepreneurs like Jamie Oliver, Oprah Winfrey, Ben & Jerry's, these are household names that have come from a space of impactful entrepreneurship. We don't see enough of that. I think all of those superstars, we have those people in the room this week. We have thousands of people. They're all in there, but are they being given the resource and the opportunity they need to succeed? I challenge that. I'm not sure we're there yet. Okay, we need to do more work on that. Partnerships I've already mentioned. For me, I founded 3 businesses. I founded a business at university, which turned over 25,000 in a day. It was just selling books. Yeah, it was before Amazon that blew us out the water, but before that happened, the power of community, 4,000 people queuing, yeah, around the block for a need. That teaches you something when you're young about possibility and opportunity, but I felt very privileged to have that. And how do you share that? How do you get people involved? I'll give an example later. And finally, I founded a human rights charity as well, which is all about giving young professionals an opportunity to practically learn the skills of entrepreneurship. So give them a small amount of money to simply start something at school or university. It's so powerful, because if they get that experience younger, they can then go and run with that as they get into their professional careers. Final thing I'll say is, and I can actually see a giant image of his head over there, which is slightly off-putting, but Brad Feld, who spoke so brilliantly at the end of yesterday, talked a bit about ecosystem building and about obviously giving back and mentoring. I felt he missed out one crucial element, though. He didn't talk about that impact or that legacy. What is the impact on the community? What is that long-term legacy that we're creating? Because the danger is we have initiatives that start and they run and they end, yeah? And there's nothing left, especially when it's publicly funded. So how do we ensure we've got business models, but we also have great stories that last.
In Brazil, science and business used to be disconnected. Now, recently, that started to collaborate and start to have more deep techs and other things. What do you think, Daniel? How can governments and universities better support impact-driving businesses?
The question about government supporting impact, and I'm going to say something that, politically we just have to be aware of. There has to be a willingness, right? Because in the United States, the focus of the current administration isn't necessarily like impact and collaboration around climate, right? So we have to be very intentional about doing three things. The first is, I think the world has evolved past reliance on the government structure, right? I think that we're currently seeing a transition, regardless of a person's political ideology, in every corner and every structure of government, we're seeing a mass transition. It's either going far in one direction or far in the other direction. So I think the space that we have to really look at is how are we tapping in to the next generation, right? And that willingness, I think, has to be a combination of government, but also the private sector, right? And I mean, I would ask each of you on the willingness side, how many young people are you bringing into the room? Because in the countries that I'm seeing are thriving, they're countries that are embracing the idea of young people bringing and driving innovation, right? Not just being in the room and filling a seat or being an intern, but bringing them in and allowing them to have that transition. In the United States, you may or may not know, there was a gentleman by the name of Congressman John Lewis, and Congressman Lewis at 17 marched with Dr. King, right? And he was my mentor. So for the first 10 or 15 years of my life, I had somebody that guided me and gave me direction. So every decision I made, every position I held was rooted in what I learned, right? So I wouldn't have been appointed by 2 presidents or worked as a founder if I didn't have someone when I was in my 20s say, we're gonna bring you in and teach you. Because what we're now seeing globally is a very reactionary space where the will of the people is not always what is driving policy. And I think the scary part about it is just like AI. AI is important and it's critical, but if we don't create societies that can grow with AI, then AI will outpace us, and we will become more reliant on the algorithm versus just that human connectivity that speaks directly to where people are and what's actually needed. And as in the U.S., for example, I'll end here, I think the biggest challenge we have is that we have gotten more on political differences than on this sense of like corporate or at least like unified type of growth and progress. So we're seeing so many silos that we don't really have a target. It's like everybody's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks versus having a plan and a policy in place.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, where do we have common ground? We should be looking for common ground, not for differences, especially in this space. I used to work for the UK's biggest foundation for social ventures, for social businesses, called Unlimited. And we had a £100 million endowment given by the government. That was at a time when the UK government had £100 million to sort of throw around, which we don't have anymore, sadly. But that says something, I think, about the power of government to convene, but not to fund and not to create legacy. Ultimately, we worked with 100 universities across the UK. We have a lot of universities in the UK. They're brilliant ecosystem builders. They're often the second biggest employer in their town or location. They have access to regional development agencies in the UK, entrepreneurship networks, local housing projects, individuals who have the ability to convene and to change the world, namely entrepreneurs. And those sustainable ecosystems matter. And so that was where I cut my teeth in this space, because fast forward the last 10 years, the state has shrunk in the UK, in the US, around the world. We're now forced to bring in commercial investment, but for me, that isn't a choice. It's part and parcel of the expectation of legacy. We need to have commercial, public-private partnerships to do this work well. So for me, institutions like universities are a great building block, but we have to build from that platform, and we must bring in commercial investment to supplement that public funding.
I want to talk about other thing that is really important, about the greenwashing. How can we stop greenwashing and ensure companies are genuinely committed to social and environmental impact beyond just marketing? Daniel.
So I have a friend named Eric Litz. He created the Yeezys for Kanye, and he managed Ivy Park for Beyonce while he was at Adidas. And he not only managed brand release and strategy for Adidas, but he also managed the World Cup portion of their engagement as a brand. And when Eric left, it was because of what you just said. He had been to Climate Week, he had been to Davos, he had been to, the World Cup, to the Super Bowl, to all these events, and he realized that over time, these companies weren't actually investing, right? I mean, like we use these terms like ESG, and we turn our logos green. And so I have a background where I've been very privileged to have worked with a lot of athletes and entertainers around the world, and very few of them, I'll say about maybe less than 10% of the companies that have engaged us for artists have really been committed, right? And I'll give you a few examples. When Coca-Cola, and I'm from Atlanta, right? But when Coca-Cola bought will.i.am in, they created a recycling program called EcoCycle, right? And when will.i.am came, he had a list of demands because Will is really committed to global sustainability and climate impact. And so Will was not willing to continue to work as a global ambassador for Coke because he didn't feel that they were as committed to what he signed up to. And this is a much smarter generation that's not going to be, used in a sense to build a global brand and leave another behind. I currently work with Billie Eilish on her international tour, and we do a climate aspect of Billie's concert, right? So when I think of the question as to driving these, commitments from not greenwashing and putting things in place, it has to be rooted in three areas. Number one, you have to be educated and educate your community and understand that everyone is not going to see it from a scientific or from a philanthropic perspective. So we have to speak to people where they are. Secondly, we got to get out of the way of young people that are telling the story better, right? Like one area that I think corporations have a lot of money and a lot of resources, and they tend to overspend and kind of like underproduce. But when you take someone that is really a content creator, they have the ability to drive conversation, and we need to find ways to bring those worlds together. And the third part that I think is really critical is when you look at a room like this, you guys may not work specifically for some of these organizations as greenwashing, but your network touches those organizations, and we do a really good job at convening, but we don't do a good job of ensuring that when we're in these spaces, we're holding these organizations accountable. So when we're allowed, or when we're at our board meetings or in these spaces, we have to be a lot more direct as to how our space and how that conversation can drive the change. Because if we don't, they're going to continue to believe that what they're doing is effective. And if you look around the world right now, the trust people have in brands has declined enormously because of the trust that individuals don't really have.
How are you?
Yeah, I want to build on that. 3 quick points for you. Number one, 96% of all social businesses go on to create the social impact they say they will. So social business doesn't greenwash. First. So if you are a social business, you're in a great place. If you're partnering with a social business, you're in a great place. If you're an attender with a social business, you're in a great place. Number two, I look around here and I think Indiana's done an incredible job at rolling out the red carpet for us. But what worries me about that red carpet, or grey silver carpet, is that at the end of this week, along with all these incredible spaces that have been created, much of this is going to go straight into landfill. It's not sustainable. We're not living our values. Yeah, that's not a criticism of Jen, because Jen put on an incredible week. And there are sustainable elements about what we do here, but it isn't enough. We are not living our values sufficiently. And finally, and I feel a book coming on here, everyone else this week is launching a book. Maybe I should launch one too. 3 points. Proximity, empathy, authenticity. First of all, proximity to the problem. You've heard that old quote of, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Be close to the problem you're trying to solve. Get uncomfortable. Number 2, empathy. Obviously, understand people, relate to people, network. This is a wonderful forum for that. And finally, be authentic, because all of you as an audience, and frankly as participants and speakers, we can tell when people are not being authentic. You can tell when our leaders are not being authentic. We have to get under the skin of that. We have to ask the tough questions. And that's why I'm hoping we'll get some tough questions from you this afternoon.
Can I say something really quickly? Because on his point, I want to just really say, I live in Atlanta, and the World Cup will be there. Los Angeles will have the Olympics. There's homelessness all over, and we can't ignore it, right? So when these lights go out, when the food is away, greenwashing, a lot of times we think just of what corporations' commitments are to having an impact on communities. We can't take out the human factor of how these individuals and communities are continuously left behind. Because, and not to be critical of the city, because most U.S. cities do this, you have the Indy 500, you have this event, you're about to have the NBA Finals, and how much of that revenue really goes to social impact and change. So when I think of greenwashing, I don't just think of from a sustainability standpoint. I think of, human beings being our greatest natural resource and how we treat them.
I would like to explore more about this point of new generation, the mindset of this. How can younger generation shift their mindset to build businesses that put purpose, really purpose, at the center, not just profit?
You want to start?
I'll start because I think the answer is simple. They already are. Yeah, if you heard Ashish Advani yesterday speak eloquently about those three numbers, and if any of you remember those three numbers, the first number was 70%. Yeah, I see a few faces nodding in the audience. 70% of young people are already building climate into their businesses today, so it's already happening. Now, my friend AI has a few other very helpful statistics I wanted to read out to you very quickly. In the US, 24% of young people 18 to 24 are already starting a social business. In the UK, it's about half of that, 13%, yeah? But these are exciting and encouraging numbers, yeah? So young people are already doing this. It's how do we platform them so they can do more? I've seen some young people in the audience this week. I'd like to see more in the future.
I would say get out of their way. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. Like, every young person I've engaged from South Africa to Brazil to anywhere I go, they're doing the work. What they need is our support and our guidance, right? I mean, we tend to put barriers up in front of so many young people. I think what we need to do is offer a sense of lessons learned. The panel before this, they brought up a really good point. When we were growing up, we hated when people told us we were wrong, or that we were not doing something a certain way. And now we've become those same voices of criticism rather than support. And I think that we need to allow these younger audiences not necessarily to just make mistakes, because there is going to be a learning curve and they'll grow, but guiding them in this process. And, I was speaking to one of the presenters earlier, and he said something that was really important. He was like, AI is not coming, it's already here. And one of the biggest industries that we have to push young people towards is over 60 or 70% of the individuals using AI are like technologically, just they don't understand any of it. And so if we can get these young folks to monetize their knowledge of social media and of AI and technology, the educational component of how they can drive those conversations and lead them, I think will be magnified even more than where they are.
Big challenge. As small companies grow financially, how can they stay true to their mission of supporting people, nature, and local communities? Daniel.
Again, I think, when I think of nature and communities, how many of y'all are familiar with COP, the international? Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this year, the Global Climate Summit is in Brazil, right? And when you say true to local communities, they cut down all the trees for a sustainability conference. I mean, it doesn't make sense. There was no road to get to where the conference was, and instead of them building infrastructure, they literally depleted the ecosystem, right? So I think we need to return to nature, because, I'm a big advocate. Like, during the Obama administration, we worked with the Department of Education to encourage outdoor classrooms. We worked with Michelle Obama to encourage the Let's Move campaign, which was able to get young people out, address food deserts. We are building cities on top of agriculture. And so when the average, young person or leader is coming up and they don't understand farm to table or agriculture or where produce comes from, most of us at one point understood our role and kind of the complexity between, humans and nature, right? It's no longer a requirement, because it's very hard, one, to get people to go to a national park, right, or a state park, or to travel to go to see, nature. But I think where we are today that really is bothersome is that we are currently seeing the decline of the very structures that I think have an impact on mental health, well-being, social integration. These are all things that have to do with nature, with the community, with the air we breathe. I grew up with asthma, so I pay a lot of attention to the quality of the air, the quality of the water. And as we see those areas compromised globally, I think we have to do a better job with early education and with institutions to reinforce the importance of those areas.
I used to run a network internationally called the Global Social Entrepreneurship Network, which of course rings a bell because it's only one more letter than Gen, yeah? And we had 60 partners in 70 countries around the world. But we didn't have the scale that Gen does. Why did we not have the scale that Gen does? Well, because it wasn't all about the money. It wasn't all about the commercial opportunity that entrepreneurs create. It was about the wider people and planet impact that we could deliver on. And I want to be bold because, of course, the strapline for this week is about being bold. I would love to see Gen launch a new campaign called Gen Sustain, where we can actively profile and role model those successful and those growing and nurtured social entrepreneurs all around the world, many of whom are already in here and waiting for that platform, and put funding behind it. We need to put money where our mouth is when it comes to social entrepreneurs, yeah? I want to be using that terminology more. I want us to be celebrating the impact because the people outside these four walls are crying out for it, yeah? Remember those 70%. 70% of young people are telling us, why aren't you already doing this and why aren't you doing more of it?
The time is so short, and we talk about a lot of topics. I would like to talk about suggestions. Recommends any books, series, documentaries for people who want to better understand impact, entrepreneurship, and global ecosystem.
I read a lot, right? But what I'm reading currently are a lot of books about the historical context of how democracies and civilizations transitioned, right? I don't have a current book. I mean, I will recommend. I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan, so I love Tipping Point. I love certain books that talk about making connections with people in society. I think that what we need to focus on, you mentioned empathy earlier. I think more than anything else, we have to continue to use the internet and leverage resources to learn about the time we're living in, because what's needed more than anything else is leadership, right? What I'm most excited about being at this conference is I've met at least 30 or 40 people outside of these rooms that can be on this stage. And so I'm actually looking for the authors and the titles that we don't see on the New York Times bestseller list, because there are a lot of books right now that I think are out, and they're great books with great themes, but nothing has really, hit me at the core of my heart. Like, what my mission is right now is for young boys globally, especially black and brown boys that are being left behind with the advent of AI. There's a quote that I'll leave you guys with that Frederick Douglass made. He said, "It's better to build strong boys than to repair broken men," right? So when you look at what COVID did, 4 years ago, over 100 million children globally that left school never went back. And I want you to put that into perspective. Developing nations and certain countries are already far beyond the curve. And so what happens when entire populations of society are left behind when AI, not in a decade or in even 5 years, within the next 3 years, the world as we know it will not be the same. Over 30% of jobs between now and 2032 will be gone due to autonomous driving, AI. We have to evolve as a society, and I'm looking for not just books, but resources and information that allows me to understand not just the US, but globally.
So I'm British, so I do have a little book list for you, if you forgive me of that. A bit of a geek, a bit of a nerd. One of my favorites is by David Bornstein, who some of you will know as a famous entrepreneur and social entrepreneur in the US. It's called How to Change the World. Simple as that, How to Change the World. It should be top of everybody's reading list, in my opinion. The other one which should be top of reading list is Creating a World Without Poverty by Muhammad Yunus, who of course created the Grameen Bank and is currently the president of Bangladesh. And a Netflix documentary that I loved watching recently was called Inside Bill's Brain, Decoding Bill Gates. And obviously his commitment recently to give away all of his money to the continent of Africa. And a personal, well, couple of books that are my personal favorites that I reread every year. First of all, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I think most of the audience probably know who Simon Sinek is. The Power of Purpose in Business of Any Kind. And finally, a New York Times bestseller by David Epstein called Range. Yeah, one of my absolute favorite books. So David was a professional athlete. One of his very good friends, a very successful American track athlete, dropped dead on the start line of the Olympic trials. And he wanted to understand how a very fit 25-year-old how that could happen. And he wrote this book because he understood that athletics, the world, is not about individuals with very strong vertical training regimes and experience. It's about actually having practical experience of the whole world. Yeah, not just about your vertical engineer, scientist, etc., but understanding a bit about everything. Really powerful read. Encourage you to pick it up.
Wow. Now we open to the questions for the audience.
Hi, good evening. We are doing things in three, so I'm going to do it really quickly. Notes. Okay. So while I understand... Can you hear me?
I can't hear you that well.
You can't?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. While I understand the need to incorporate and include youth, I am 39 years old. And one of the things that I have noticed is you would have opportunities for people up to X age, and then you exclude people who may be passionate in something, but because their age is a little older, they do not have the opportunity that we have exposed, for other people. The other thing is, what about the neo-entrepreneur? We spent an entire week listening to multimillionaires and people who have been extremely successful, but we leave behind the people who are just now starting or haven't just started, but are in a place where they're not quite sure. A lot of the times people say, come and ask questions, and then when you come up to ask questions, they're like, okay, well, we're in a photo op, or we have to move on. And then the last thing that you spoke about was sustainability, right? If you have, for me, we spoke a lot about tech this week. I'm an emergency physician by profession. And so every single time, from the time I became an entrepreneur back in 2016 till now, we leave out healthcare. Nobody gives a crap. When the time I say I am a doctor or I have a daycare, people go, okay. And then they move on. Nobody cares. And tech has taken over from 2016 until now. Nobody gives a crap for most other things except what the focus is on at that point.
So I'll start on the age portion where she mentioned the gap when we have a hyper focus on youth. And I think that is a challenge of every generation, right? Like every generation can argue that they were left behind in some particular area. I think what we have to do a better job of combines two of your questions. The first on the age you currently are and this gap between, very young and at the pinnacle of their career. But also, when you mentioned when you talked about the focus and the investment on how the millionaires, you mentioned the very highly successful. I would argue different, right? I don't think we've seen as many on stage, but I think overwhelmingly I've engaged a lot of individuals that are working in this space, like Tara Lynn Gray, who just spoke from California. She runs a small business initiative, and she's working with everything from early stage to like the mid portion to where they're getting their funding. I believe that what needs to happen more is in these rooms and conversations, it's great to see us on stage and for us to see you. I wish one thing that this summit would offer is a founders town hall where the individuals that are organizing this can hear your question, because that means that at our next one in South Africa or whatever happens, it needs to have that space, room for growth and improvement. Surveys don't always show that, right? The passion in your voice and what you just said is important. Now, I will tell you that, at least in the South, we're actually combining technology and public health because of infant mortality rates amongst black women in the South, but also rural health care and the lack of access to hospitals and facilities. We're seeing more data centers in the South than hospitals. And when you're closing hospitals and opening data centers and fossil fuel facilities that are overpolluting the community, that causes in space where life expectancy goes down, and that 25-year-old that was on the starting line, we're seeing a heightened amount of entrepreneurs that are dying prior to 60 because of stress, mental health issues, and a lack of support from a resourcefulness standpoint. So I think the conversation of a healthy entrepreneur should be included in these conversations.
And just very quickly, you heard it here first. Daniel said it. South Africa next year. Yeah, spread that rumor. It may not be true. I hope it is true. We've no idea. We'll find out tomorrow.
Hey, I need y'all to edit my comment out.
Yeah, we can edit that out, I'm sure. You didn't hear it, yeah? Look, I'm 40 this year. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. I feel young. Yeah, this is a slightly glib comment, but bear with me. I feel young. Yeah, I've got great ideas. I've got lots I want to do. I want to work with people of all ages, and I want us to provide platforms that invite everyone in. Everyday entrepreneurs. The final thing, because I know how annoying it is where panelists always agree. I actually agree with everything Daniel said, apart from the one thing. We've seen too many millionaires, in my opinion. Yeah, too many panelists that have made a lot of money and now want to give some of it back, and that's great. Yeah, it's aspirational, but I want to see people that we can relate to. Yeah, I want to see more of that. I want to hear more of the audience participating. I'm going to stay around after this panel conversation to talk to everyone that wants to have a discussion. Yeah, I'm not going to run out the door. I'm not going to ignore you. Yeah, I'm going to be here for that. We need to engage with the community. It's not just about people coming on stage, getting asked some easy softball questions, and then walking off.
Hi, really great session. Anita Shankar, I'm from Johns Hopkins. And a couple of things that you've kind of mentioned about the impacts of entrepreneurship to be able to reach these social causes. The fact of the matter is we need governments also to be able to help those vulnerable people, because it's simply not profitable to be able to create these safety nets. And if there's some way that these young entrepreneurs can be more efficiently working with government to have better systems, I'd really like to be able to see that. The other thing is, you kind of talked a lot about this, the technology and also empathy and trust. With all the AI and with all the internet and digital engagements, we aren't building basic human qualities. Young people don't necessarily know how to talk to each other or be empathetic or be able to be uncomfortable in these hard conversations. So any suggestions that you may have in terms of how do we build that trust? I think a lot of people don't trust businesses because they will greenwash. Oh, look, I'm recycling. We know what happens to recycling. Most of it doesn't get recycled. So how do we bring truth back? And how do we have social entrepreneurs help us do that?
So I'll start by saying that's a great. Please clap for that question. I think that was important. So we're running short on time, and I know there's like one or two more questions. So let me answer this like in the best way possible. Number one, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I went to a historically black college. It's Clark Atlanta University. We have shout out to HBCUs in the back. Minority serving institutions and historically black colleges and tribal institutions are some of the most underused facilities. What we need more of is the John Hopkins of the world and these institutions to come out of their campuses and have more virtual settings in communities. Because what the challenge is, most of the brightest and the best ideas in our community, not just black and brown kids, rural kids without access to information, broadband deserts. They're kids that even if you offered free courses online, they can't get online. So I think what needs to happen is, again, I come from the federal government. I've worked with 3 administrations and been appointed in 2. The government is not going to be able to save and redirect and rebuild the way we need it to. And in the process of them trying to figure it out, we're losing a generation. Right? So what I recommend is there need to be more of a consortium of healthcare professionals. We need trade folks that understand how to do and create vocational spaces for these young people. The way we educate, train, and teach, if you really want to understand why the current president is elected, we can argue over his policies. It's his presence, right? It's going to UFC. It's going on podcasts. We have to change the way we're introducing education, right? We're creating a STEM initiative with the NBA and the NFL and the WNBA because we understand the power of sports. So if we can introduce STEM through sports and they don't get STEM from Georgia Tech, MIT, or Stanford, then we can at least engage them there and use entertainment. That's why with Billy's tour, we actually do a climate conference and introduce teachers and professionals and scientists during this series so we can educate her fan base. So my point is we have to think of non-traditional ways to do it. So I'm going to end on that question and see if you had another question.
I'll answer you after the event so we can take the last 2 questions.
Hi, my name is Selena Green. I'm also a social entrepreneur. And my question is, two of the things that I've seen that social entrepreneurs need in this ecosystem and is missing in all ecosystems is aligned capital. And so I wanted to know if you had suggestions about the right type of capital, the 100x, hockey stick expectation type of capital isn't the right fit for us. So a lot of enterprises die before we can do the things that you're talking about. So if you have any suggestions about funds or types of funds, capital that would be suitable for us, want to help with that. And then also we need places to pilot our solutions. So we might have solutions for government, but if we can't get in to even have a pilot and have proof of concept, then it's not proven and they don't buy from us unless it's proven. So capital and pilots.
Just really quickly, because again, I can be more specific after the session, but for me, I've coached thousands of social entrepreneurs, thousands of commercial entrepreneurs as well, and the question I get asked the most is, where's my nearest VC? And the answer I give them is, do you need VC funding? What's the next step in your development journey? Because as you say, most VCs, not all VCs, are looking for 25, 30, 50x. Yeah, not all, many. Angel investors. Totally underlooked. We have a community of angel investors here this week. I want to see them more in the event. I want to see them accessible. They've been in their own track. Yeah, great. They have a track. I want them in our tracks so they can talk to entrepreneurs. So we have that network. They want to be here too. So making angel investors more visible at events like this and pilots. To be honest, I think this should be the fertile ground for us to be able to pilot. Yeah, I know Jonathan Altmans has created this incredible global movement. There are opportunities within Global Entrepreneurship Week, etc. There's an event earlier that enable pilots to happen. So let's use the resource we have.
Question? Stand up, please. Hi, Ezzy Redwood, a fellow doing change making at city levels. One of the things that I see is there are talented people who have the ability and the know-how to create massive change, but educating them and creating community for them is something that I don't see very often. And so I'm wondering if you all have suggestions on platforms you can recommend or communities that they can plug into, or we can plug people who are high potential into to get them to upskill and get that sense of community that supports them in creating that change. Thanks.
So I think, and forgive me because I heard a portion of the question where it was talking about the mentoring side, like, how to engage. I think, again, and I don't mean to sound redundant, we have to really, like this morning they had a session on LinkedIn. I like to consider myself well-versed on LinkedIn. I didn't understand half the stuff the man was talking about because I didn't know you could do that much with it. And I have, I think, one of the highest subscriptions you can have with LinkedIn, which I'm probably wasting my money if I'm not using all the features, right? So I think we have to do three things. Number one, we have to identify who our target audience is and where they are. One of the things we did when I first joined the Biden administration was we used Twitch to engage students around voting, right? I mean, no one would have thought about doing a Twitch conversation. We had 14,000 people watching two congressmen playing Fortnite, right? I mean, so is it unorthodox? Of course, right? But at the same time, we got 14,000 18 to 24-year-olds on an application that just wanted to sit there and watch this while information was being shared. So when we understand our demographic and we understand the platforms, the third and most important part is find someone or do a tutorial. Like when I was growing up, on the age myself, we had like Encyclopedia Britannica, right? So you can go and Google or go to YouTube and you can just literally type in, how do I effectively use Instagram? Now, you may have 1,000 videos, but if you look at the count of how many people watched or liked that video, you can self-train yourself to say, okay, I'm going to use LinkedIn to do X, Y, Z, or whatever the case may be. But I would like to speak to you after, because I don't know if there's another question, but I wanted to just make sure we answered it softly, but I'd like to stay after and tell you some of the things that's worked for me.
Yeah, Masterclass, Techstars, Impact Hub, the list goes on. I could reel off a whole series of examples. There's so much out there, but we're not profiling them.
We have one more question.
Hi, Simon Goon from the UK. I'm a director of a B Corp. So there's something here about credited organisations through mechanisms like that. But actually, I wonder whether the challenge is the title. It's not about social entrepreneurialism or impact entrepreneurialism. It's about just doing business responsibly. And perhaps there's something here in the branding, because social entrepreneurialism implies not-for-profit. We need to make profits. Profit's good. What do you do with those profits is the most important thing. So there's something about the title I think we need to challenge ourselves to make this more mainstream and acceptable.
And quickly, just to build on that, absolutely right, Simon. Great to have such a brilliant point from the UK at the very end of the session. Thank you for that. I didn't plant it, I didn't pay him anything. It's true, absolutely. B Corp should be here. They're not. They're a global movement. They started in the Americas. When I was based in Mexico City, they were huge in Latin America. The SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, they were mentioned on the main stage. They've not been mentioned enough. What are these international frameworks? What's the language that we can all get behind? And Simon absolutely was right. It's what we do with the money that matters. If you want to know how social an organization is, just look at their accounts.
Unfortunately, the time is over, but thank you so much for your time. Was my first moderating in English, and and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks a lot.